Hello, friends. This is Clarissa Constantine coming to you. For those of you I haven't met, I'm actually the founder of the Parent Tween Connection. And one of our goals here is to help you as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, teachers, mentors, fundamentally adults who have teens and tweens in your lives, help you find community and also help you become more knowledgeable about some of the things that are going on with our teens. Not to like scare you or terrify you or be heavy, but to empower you, because the more you know, the more you can connect with your kids. And so I shared an article today that our trusted expert Linda Hollenbach of Hollenbach Consulting had actually shared with me, and I shared it with you, and I wanted to add some of my thoughts into it. So the article was titled, "What is a back to school necklace?" I'm not going to go into the depths of the article right now. Please do take a minute to read it. It's in the comments for this live. But there's a couple of things I wanted to point out and add to. First of all, one of the first points the author makes is that once parents are educated on this term in particular, and I think in general, you're in a better position to help your kids. So one of the social workers, psychotherapists that they mention in there recommends that you can use this article as a launching pad for a conversation with your kids. So she says you might start out by saying, "Hey, I heard about this thing called back to school necklaces. Do you know what that is? Or have you heard any of your friends talking about it?" But what she says is that an open conversation is always beneficial. She says it's always important to refrain from judgment so that your child feels comfortable sharing how they're feeling. So the idea of non judgment, man, I feel like that comes up in absolutely every conversation that I have related to mental health. And I think a lot of us as adults underestimate how much the teens and tweens in our lives don't want to disappoint us. So I really want to invite you in the realm of non judgment to listen to the thoughts that are in your head, whether it's the thoughts about yourself, the thoughts about the kids in your world, the people that you work with, your boss. A lot of things that we say in jest, or we say to make light of a situation, but really they're a lot more judgy or critical than we might realize. So one of the things that I want to invite you to consider in the spirit of presenting a non-judgmental ear to our kids is an acronym called THINK, and it can help us remember to think before we speak or think before we respond. So the T is to ask yourself, is what I'm about to say true? Is the thought that I just had helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Like, is anything good going to come out of it? Or is it kind? So, is it true, helpful, inspiring, necessary, or kind? If we challenge ourselves to consider this more on an everyday basis, then it's going to help us bring that concept into the relationships with our partners, with our kids, and frankly, with ourselves as well. So, non judgment is really important when you pose this question to your kids. The second piece is to recognize that your kids are hearing about things like this. They're hearing about mental health, they're hearing about drugs, they're having conversations about suicide and all kinds of things with their kids. And frankly, they're having these conversations way younger than any of us want to acknowledge. So for those of you who are like, "Oh, my kids aren't thinking about that yet," I challenge you to reconsider the idea that maybe they are. And it's not a question, I believe, of whether the teens and tweens in our lives are going to have these conversations, but really it's more a question about whether we are going to be part of the conversation. If we choose to participate, we can influence these conversations. It used to be, for example, that a lot of folks thought that mentioning suicide to kids was going to actually increase the likelihood that they would attempt suicide. When in reality, we actually now know, thanks to more social acceptance of talking about mental health issues and research that's been done, we actually know that asking somebody whether they have plans to kill themselves or whether they have plans to complete suicide actually reduces the likelihood. And we can have the same conversation about, like, have you tried drugs? Have you, how far have you gone in terms of sex? If we don't take these steps with our kids, they're not going to take the steps with us. So really work to do everything that you can to step forward and ask them these questions. But here's the thing, you can use the article as a launch pad to start the conversation. But please also consider including in your conversation that you're educating your kids about this. If they haven't heard about a back to school necklace, for example, then if their friends are talking about it, your teen or tween isn't going to know that it's actually a very serious statement. So, as part of your conversation, consider saying to them, hey, if you hear your friends talking about this, you need to let an adult know. Don't just let it go. Don't just think it's funny and ha ha and let it go. Even if your friend says, hey, don't tell anybody, this is something that very well could have life or death implications if you hear your friends talking about self harm or anything relevant to suicide or death by your own hand. That's something that you need adult support for. So, there's just a couple of thoughts. One thing that I do want to share with you, I recently took the Youth Mental Health for First Aid program with Kelly Hansen, who's one of our members here in Parent Twin Connection. My husband Joe and I both took it. One of the most powerful things or powerful tools that she offered us was to practice actually asking, are you thinking of completing suicide? Are you thinking of killing yourself? It is horrifying to actually ask that. And I've had to ask it. I've had to ask it of people very close to me. I'm not saying it's easy, but if they say yes, the next step is to say, have you gone so far as to acquire the tools that you need to complete an attempt? Because that gives us a sense of how far they've gone and how much thought they've put into it, what resources they have. I also want to make sure that you know last week here in the US, we just launched a new emergency support line, 988. It's like 911, but it is specifically for mental health crises. And if you have the bandwidth or the inclination, they are definitely looking for people to volunteer to staff the calls on the other end. If you just Google 988, you can find more information. But my hope is this, that you can use this article and some of what I've offered here as a launch pad to have a conversation with your kids. A lot of kids, I'm sure, are starting to stress out. I know here in Colorado, our kids are starting school in the next few weeks. I know in other parts of the country or around the world, you may be starting a month from now or longer. But a lot of times the new school year brings up a lot of anxiety. So use this as a starting place to have those conversations with your kids. If you've got any questions, reach out to me. I am a certified life coach. I can help you navigate some of this, but hope this gives you a foundation to have some great conversations with your kids.